Welcome into this week's edition of On the Spot. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined by Zach Strickland. And Zach, we had a massive announcement last week at F3. You were a part of that announcement. It's really the first overhaul of Sonar transitioning to this new UI. Figured a little different on the spot segment. We're gonna break down what's new about the new UI. And we'll pull up the screenshot of the whole UI in terms of pulling up a chart. Kind of break down what's the highlights of the new UI?
Well, I think Craig said it best when we were out there giving our presentation. He kind of led things off and stated we really hadn't gone back in and kind of cleaned up some of the stuff. You know, when you're producing things, you have to go at light speed, you got to push things out, and sometimes that means that the infrastructure doesn't get the attention that it needs. And we really went back and kind of cleaned up all of that infrastructure where there's things that we could streamline, make a little bit more effective. And when you get in there, you'll know it right away. Yeah. Everything just functions. You know, I think Apple does a really good job with some of their products. Is it's almost like you don't notice it until it's not there with some of the functionality and the features. And then, of course, the UI, like anytime you click on it, and somebody like me who's in it all day, you know, can appreciate the speed and the transitions that you get. And of course, little things like the seasonality chart that you have pulled up here. This is, you know, it's a color coded, you don't have to deal with like certain colors not being what you want. There's a consistency now. Yeah, I mean, rely on, and it just makes the whole experience a lot better. Yeah, I mean, I think the first one is the speed of being able to pull a chart itself, right? Yeah. In the current UI, you have to go add a page, add a widget, add a chart widget. Now it's as simple as clicking the button at the top. Right. It's this chart, and you can pull this up. Yeah. So it's a matter of 2 clicks, right? Clicking the chart and then clicking where you're writing, clicking in the symbol. But you mentioned it, the color and the color coding of the seasonality. I think this is a big one, especially when you're every year has its own color now that will remain static
across every index. And I think that's the key is. And we have it pulled up. I pulled it up in 2 different indexes, pulled up seasonality. Run the NTI here. We can talk about where it is and what it's doing. But you look at it, you've got that green line 2022. Well, you go to the next chart, talking about outbound volumes, that green line stays the same in terms of it's 2022. Yeah. So it's great if you're looking at it, say, every week, pulling this up.
You know, for executive summaries. I mean, a lot of people use Sonar for executive summaries, kind of explaining the transportation and logistics environment to the higher ups that may not understand it. And this just makes it a lot easier, especially when you're looking at things annually. You can put this on a side-by-side, and you can see the same color on the chart. I used to do this manually all the time because it was just simpler for me personally. But I mean, the bottom line is we're trying to make it easier to understand the information that's in the background.
Yeah, and then I think one of the other interesting phenomenons, or not phenomenons, what a big thing that got overhauled, and it's one of the interesting, to me, it just makes life a little easier when you go in. It's looking at market dashboard. We'll go forward because just looking at market dashboard, it's more rate focused. It is in your face now. We've taken the map and moved it, and it's made it more dynamic as a whole, right? Right now, you can't tell that, but when you shrink this down, that map moves to the bottom as opposed to now, in the current UI, it stays at the top. And while it's important, the ultimate goal of Market Dashboard is to get that rate in front of the user, and ultimately that's what we're doing. I think the other nice part is we pulled some of the data that you had to click and pull out yourself. It is now there in front of you as a whole.
Yeah, and I don't want to discount the map down here because we've got some plans for that coming up that are going to be really, really awesome. But you know, you don't have any contract rates on here, Tony. So,
I know.
But you can get contract rates into this thing, and I think that's also kind of a fun way to look at the market dashboard is because spot rates, I think most people, especially you had the NTI out, and spot rates overall haven't been that interesting. But at a granular level, I mean, you've got one pulled up right here, Los Angeles to Dallas. Los Angeles rates have been increasing off of their floors that occurred back in April and May earlier this year. And this has been one of the hottest areas of the country. But contract rates, of course, and this is a great tool to see some of that. When you have the contract rates on here, spot rates have been increasing, but they're still below that contract level. And the tighter that gets, that's going to tell you, I mean, especially since it's bid season. You know, if spot rates are coming up underneath contract rates and you're expecting a 5% rate decrease in this lane where spot rates are already right under it, that's an easy use case to be like, hey guys, we might need to hold off.
Yeah, and I think one of the other interesting parts of this is we've added in the flat rate, right? From a broker perspective, that's what they're quoting most of the time when they're going to a carrier is, hey, this is the rate. This is what the price is. And you can either take...
Most people don't think about the rate in a $2.37 per mile fashion. It's more like, it's $1,500, it's $2,400.
Yeah, but we do. Looking at the market dynamics, we like to look at it on that per mile because it makes it easier to make judgments across lane to lane or against the national average, right? You can kind of tell where a market is versus a flat rate, which on a day-to-day, the day-to-day user of Market Dashboard that's in there trying to quote freight that same day, they can go in and click the flat rate, and guess what? Shows up, and you're like, well, this is what the market says that flat rate is. You're not having to do any math and trying to figure out. You just know what it is.
Fun fact about me, I hate rate per mile. I mean, because you have to, it's not intuitive. It's not intuitive enough. Yes, when you're in a lane consistently, it makes sense. I know that's how we price it. I was in pricing for a decade. It is what it is, but at the same time, that flat rate is, I mean, when you have various lengths of haul, you don't want to compare a 500-mile lane to a 1,000-mile lane and a rate per mile. And of course, with a flat rate, it makes it a lot easier to understand the nuance.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that users, once they have the new UI in their hands, the thing that they'll notice is the speed and which the data comes in, right? Because when you pull this up initially, there will be nothing here. You get to put in the rate. So instead of taking a little while to load and load that pre-loaded rate that you kind of have saved already, it's going to be empty. You just go in and click it, and it's not pulling all this other data. It's just pulling that information for that lane. I think that's going to be the interesting part, that it's really hard to show it here and in this static format. But once you get in there and use it, it's going to be, it's more intuitive and like where navigation and everything is, but the speed of the usage is going to be, for those power users, is going to be that much more beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the big point of most of this, is just improve the speed. That infrastructure was kind of sitting there with stuff on the side of the road. Now we've cleaned some of that out. Also, moving forward, we've set the table to start kind of pushing things a little bit forward faster with some of the additions. I already teased you with the map situation here, but there's also going to be some other things going on here in the future that are going to be fun.
Awesome stuff, Zach. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about all these enhancements to that SONAR UI. Right now, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more FreightWaves Now.